Ukraine probably slightly adjusted its counteroffensive tactics in the east and started approaching the major city Svatove from the north. At the same time, Ukrainian forces in the south are gaining a foothold and reinforcing their positions while waiting for massive shellings by Russians to be over. And as we already know, these attacks are basically the response from Russians for Ukrainians partially destroying Kerch Bridge, more commonly known as the Crimean Bridge. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and talk about the counteroffensive of Ukraine in the east. And on this map we can see the changes of the territorial control since my previous video, which I made last week. And as you can see, one of the biggest changes is that Ukraine is gaining more territory to the north of Svatove, which is at this very moment one of the most important cities in the east. And the reason why it is so important for Russians, it is because they use it as their one of the main resupply directions towards Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. Which means that as soon as Ukraine is able to either liberate Svatove or take the control over this road, the remaining Russian forces in Lysychansk and Severodonetsk will have it much more difficult to defend themselves. And like mentioned previously, during the last couple of weeks, Ukraine was trying to attack these strategic territories face to face. And so far, Russians were able to resist these attacks. And that is why it looks like that Ukraine will now try to encircle Svatove from the north. And as you can see, at this very moment, Ukraine is only approximately 10 kilometers away from Svatove. In addition to that, while advancing in this area, it was relatively easy for Ukrainians to liberate several settlements along the way, which pretty much confirms my statement from the previous week that Russians will not pay too much attention at defending the areas to the north of this line. Simply put, because there are no strategic cities in this area at this very moment, and the retreat of Russians to the north will simply not make sense. And that is why they might retreat to the south to the cities such as Starobilsk and give up this territory without a fight. And now let's briefly talk about the counteroffensive of Ukraine in the south. And while I'm going there, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel if you like this style of daily updating. And also follow me on Instagram if you want to see some cool stuff from Canada. Alright, and to begin with, here are once again the map changes since my previous video, which I made last week. And as you can see, the majority of combat actions with partial success, both from Ukraine and Russia, were happening in this area. And it looks like that for now, the goal of Ukraine remains the same, which is to take control over Berislav. And theoretically, Ukraine will try to approach from two sides. First one is from the northeast and the second one is from the northwest. The major slowdown in the northeast is this water obstacle, and Ukrainian forces in the northwest will have to simultaneously fight against Russians from both sides. In addition to that, the counteroffensive of Ukraine, both in the south and in the east, significantly slowed down due to most recent massive shellings of Russians against the entire territory of Ukraine. And we will talk about this in more details very soon. And as soon as Ukrainians recover from the consequences of shellings by Russians, my prediction stays the same, which is that the liberation of 1/3 of Kherson region will take place in the nearest future. You can access all the maps that I was drawing today for free in our Discord. The link will be down below. Alright, and now let's talk about the partial destruction of the Kerch Bridge, also known as the Crimean Bridge. And yeah, I know that I might be a little bit late to the party, but come on, it's never too late to talk about an event like this. So in this first video, you can see the exactly first moment of the explosion. As a result of this attack, 3 whole sections of the bridge have completely collapsed. And the railroad part of the bridge was also severely damaged. As for now, the main version is that a truck full of explosives detonated next to a train which was carrying fuel. And we might potentially see this exact exact truck entering the bridge just several minutes before the explosion in this video. But there are also other versions which claim that the explosion happened right below the bridge from the water. So just please let me know in the comments what do you think was the reason for this explosion while looking at this satellite image of the bridge. But nevertheless, as you can see, this bridge is the only land connection between Crimean Peninsula and the territory of Russia, which means that partially or completely destroying this bridge will severely disrupt the logistics of Russians in Crimea. And pretty much most, if not the entire Russian railroad logistics happens through Tokmak in the Zaporozhye region, and as you can see, it is much closer for Ukrainian HIMARS. But besides being obviously the critical infrastructure for Russians, this Crimean bridge is basically the symbol of Russia occupying Ukraine, which means that its destruction gives a huge morale boost to Ukrainians. And yes, if you want to see hundreds of photos and videos of this bridge being attacked practically from every single angle, please consider checking my Patreon. The proceeds will be donated to Ukraine, and you can find all the useful links down below. And yes, Putin obviously called this a terroristic attack, and in his mind, the counter-terroristic action would be to shell civilian areas across entire Ukraine for several days. And right now, I will be showing you the footages of these disastrous shellings. So our first video comes to us from the capital of Ukraine, Kiev. And as you can see, a Russian missile literally lands in the middle of a civilian area. Among other destroyed objects was this children's playground, as you can see from this video. And finally, we even have this video where the pedestrian bridge was being attacked. But unlike Crimean bridge, this bridge was able to sustain the explosion. Our next video comes to us from Kharkov, and as you can see, this city has been attacked as well. But we do have several videos with Ukrainian response. For example, in this video from Shebekino-Belgorod region, an electrical equipment has been destroyed. The next video comes to us from Ilovaisk, Donetsk region, where reportedly Ukrainians were able to destroy a small Russian camp. And then here is a video from Donetsk itself, which shows us the consequences of an explosion. And now let's get back to Russian attacks. And as you can see, 2 explosions happened on the road. I mean, this is definitely not a high precision attacks against military objects. Then we go down to Zaporozhye, and as you can see, pretty much the entire section of a residential building has collapsed as a result of Russian attacks. Going a little bit to the west, we can see the Ukrainian air defense system in action in Kryvyi Rog. And then a little bit more to the south, we can see a video of Russians using either thermite or white phosphorus against Nikopol. And then right here we can see a kamikaze drone which was targeting a thermal plant in Vinnytsia. And finally, here is the picture from one of the most western cities of Ukraine, Lviv. And as you can see, it has been attacked as well. On this map, presented to us by the Commander-in-Chief of Ukrainian forces, Valery Zaluzhny, we can see the areas which were shelled by Russians. It is estimated that just for previous several days alone, Russia launched approximately 100 missiles against Ukraine. But only 29 critical infrastructures were either partially or severely damaged, which means that the vast majority, the rest more than 70 missiles, were against civilian objects. And like mentioned previously, these attacks will not demoralize Ukrainians. Instead, they will unite them even more against Russians. And as you can see right here, just in a couple of days after the explosions, several roads were already reconstructed. And if you want to support my work and unlock some benefits, please consider becoming my channel member or donating through PayPal. All the other useful links can be found to my right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.